Hey, it's Drew with Como Comic Books, and today we are going to give you our number one tip for taking your comic collection to the next level. Hey everybody, my name's Drew Stewart, and if we're just meeting, I'm the owner of Como Comic Books, a comic book vendor that is based out of Columbia, Missouri. We set up at comic cons and comic shows all across the region throughout the course of the year, selling comic books, collectibles, toys, you name it. Today, what we're going to talk about is something that comes up quite a bit as we're talking to people. Part of the deal with setting up at conventions and shows, you do a lot of interacting with the public. Do a lot of interacting with other collectors, people that are seasoned veterans in the hobby, people that are just sort of dabbling in the hobby, people who are interested in with maybe starting collecting, getting back into collecting. And one of the main questions that we get all the time from people who engage with us in social, people that know us personally, is what can I do to take my collection to the next level? Oftentimes they'll see pictures that I post or that Bob posts of new books that we're adding to our collection, whether it's single issues or piles of books that come out of a collection, or mail calls, things we picked up at shows, you name it. And they want to know what they can do differently. And when they see these pictures, they're like, man, I wish I could have that in my collection. Or, I want that. Or, I wish I had one of those. I wish I could afford that. And the one thing I tell people is if you actually stop and take an inventory of what you spend a week on new books, what you spend at shows buying dollar books or this book or that book, and come up with an actual idea of how much you spend on a monthly basis and apply that towards a single book, you'd be amazed at the books you can actually pick up. So say for instance, if you spend $30 a week every week at your local comic shop, and for simplicity's sake, let's just say there's 4 weeks of new comics every month. So if you spend $30 a week, you got 4 weeks a month, that's $120 a month. You turn that $120 into one back issue as opposed to maybe 30 new comic books, okay? And the way I break this down for people is I say if you want to chase big fish, meaning comic books of higher value, key issues, classic covers, things of that nature, then you have to stop chasing little fish. So if you want to chase big fish, you've got to stop chasing little fish. And that philosophy has allowed me to have things in my collection I never expected to that I would be able to have, because I was able to concentrate my investment into the hobby, into the things that I really wanted to have. Whether it was really drilling down and putting the blinders on and finishing volume 1 of Amazing Spider-Man, or as of late I've been trying to finish a collection of all 12-cent Marvel superhero comics. You've got to first identify what your goal is, and determine, what you want to accomplish. And then once you identify your goal, you can then systematically begin working in that direction. So if your goal is to collect Silver Surfer 1 through 18, that's a great, really accessible run for a lot of people. Instead of spending your $120 a month on new books, you can take that same $120 and chances are within one calendar year, you're going to be able to knock out 1 through 18 of Silver Surfer. And, it's all relative to your budget. We're just using this number of $120 a month to replace new back issues. And I get it. I was the guy who was walking into my local comic shop and I was spending $75 to $100 a week every week, 52 weeks of the year. And I got to a point where I had just boxes full of comics that, one, weren't worth nearly what I paid for them, and two, they were taking up a ton of space. And it was at that point that I decided I was ready to do something different. And in making that change in the 4 or 5 years since I really trimmed down my pull list and decided that the focus of my collecting was going to be on back issues, Silver Age, Marvel superheroes, pre-code horror. I've just started collecting Golden Age Archie. That's another example. By drilling down and determining what was really important to me, what really appealed to me as far as collecting, I've been able to acquire a lot nicer comic books for my back issue collection than I ever would have been able to had I continued going after new issues with the same fervor that I had prior to adopting this philosophy. And I've told this to a number of people over the years, and it sounds really simple, and it is. That's the thing. You've just got to make the determination what is important to you. You know, would you rather have issue 1 through 100 of Fantastic Four, or do you want to buy every new Image comic book that comes out every single week? This may be oversimplifying it a bit, but it's really about prioritizing your interests and setting limits on yourself in regard to how you approach the collecting hobby, because it's a wide world. There are comic books out there of every interest, variety, make, model, however you want to describe it. The hard part is taking this diverse and very seasoned volume of collectibles that are out there and whittling away the things that don't have as much value to you or don't pique your interest, and really just refining that down into whatever your niche is, you know, whatever interests you the most. Once you're able to determine what you want to focus your collection on, at that point you can attack it systematically. However you want to apply your strategy, whether you want to go after the quantity, you know, the common issues, the fillers in the run, however many they may be, or if you want to attack the quality first, and if you have the discipline to forego the gratification of new things coming in, acquiring new things at a steady pace, if you can delay that gratification to the point where you can save up to knock out the quality books, then as you slowly chip away at it, at that point you can open up and you get the sense of reward of knocking off the harder issues. And as you know, each subsequent key issue or valuable issue or hard to find issue comes off your list, then at that point you're able to focus on the volume. So instead of getting one book every 2 months, every 3 months, every 6 months, depending on what it is, once you get through those hardest issues, at that point you can go to a show, you can come home with 4 or 5 issues, 2 or 3 issues, and you can really start to see that snowball effect come up, and before you know it, you've hit your goal. Obviously, some goals are harder to hit than others. If your goal is to collect Action Comics 1 through 1,000, that's going to be a very painful, very long, tedious grind of a goal. And maybe this philosophy doesn't necessarily apply to 6-figure, 7-figure books, but to most of what is available out there in terms of collecting opportunities in the hobby, you're going to be able to apply this method and see some success and see the quality of your collection increase. It took me a long time to get to the point where I realized that having a comic collection doesn't mean you have just piles and piles of boxes of comics. It can also mean that you have 10 boxes of really, really good comics. It can mean you have 20 boxes of good comics, but you have one of everything that you have interest in. And another way to look at this, is also you can set your goal as far as the grades go. I'm a bit of a completionist. I don't necessarily care to have the nicest single copy of any issue. I'd rather have every single issue. So, whereas some other friends of mine are much more focused on the condition and quality of the books, essentially, as long as the book is structurally sound, it's not brittle, it's not falling apart, it's not infested with black mold and going to contaminate the rest of my collection. If it's in one piece and readable, I'm going to be pretty okay with that book. I don't have like a basement floor where if a book's not a 4.0, I'm not going to buy it. If I feel the eye appeal of the book is satisfactory to what I'm after, I'm more than happy with that. So the main thing I would recommend if you're wanting to take your comic collection to the next level is to sit down and determine what success looks like for you as far as your comic collection is concerned. If that is having every single Image comic, awesome. If that's having Batman 200 through 251, or every Neil Adams DC superhero cover, great. But take the time, sit down, and figure out what is important to you. And once you make that determination, at that point, determine your strategy. Are you going to go after the volume and knock out the easier to, or are you going to focus on the more difficult books, the ones that may take a little more patience, a little more dedication to saving, or may take a little more dedication to grinding out, whether it's on eBay or digging through boxes just to find the books. You've got to make that determination if you're going to go for the easier parts of your goal, if you're going to go for the harder parts of your goal. One caveat I would give that, be opportunistic. If you are collecting something and you're saving up, say you're trying to save up for a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 first print. Your goal is to have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1 through 10 and the micros. So you're saving up for a #1. If you're saving up for a #1 and you have an opportunity to get a really good price on 2 through 10, all the micros, you got to be flexible with this. Our key takeaway here is if you want to chase big fish, you got to stop chasing little fish. Sit down, determine what is important to you, what you really want your collection to be. Once you figured that out, develop your strategy, figure out how you're going to attack it, and be dedicated to that strategy. Keep your focus, and when you do that, I guarantee you will see your collection begin to move in the direction you want it to, and be able to see that collection go into the next level.